we are going to move on to the session with Dr. Chatterjee. Dr. Leena Chatterjee, we are really proud to have you as our full-time faculty at BITSOM here. She joined us in July 2021 from IIM Calcutta, where she had an illustrious career spanning more than 3 decades as professor of organizational behavior. And she's an alumnus of Delhi University and has pursued her PhD from IIT Kanpur. And thank you everyone for joining in today. So you're here for a treat. Welcome, ma'am. Over to you. Let's begin the magic.
Thank you. Lovely to meet all of you. And I mean, I can't see you, of course, but I do hope I will be able to hear you when we have the question answer session. So, you know, I think one of the things I was sort of very interested to see is that we have a lot of young men in this session, and I'm very happy that they are participating. And I do want to sort of raise an issue that, you know, when I talk about some of the issues that women face in organizations, it is also true for young men today. Because I think when we look at some aspects of these issues, such as, you know, work-life balance issues, I think, you know, everybody faces work-life balance issues, not just women, right? So I think that, you know, hopefully it will be relevant for all of you. This is something that I have been a bit interested in because I've done some work in this area. And while I was at IIM Calcutta, I did do a very successful program on transitioning into leadership for women executives, because one of the things that perhaps some of you are aware of is that when we look at women in the workplace, there is something that we refer to as the leaky pipeline, which is that when you take in women at entry levels, you may have, say, 40% women at entry levels in organizations. But at mid-levels, you know, it reduces to maybe around 20%. And then when you go to the top, you have perhaps 3 to 5% women. So there seems to be a case of the vanishing woman. And that is something that, you know, has been of concern. We'll talk about why later on, perhaps, if we have time. But because of that, I have always been very keen to work with women to see how women can kind of transition these challenges and these issues to have a successful career. All right. Okay. So I'm going to share a PPT now, and I will talk a little bit. What we could do is take the questions at the end. Perhaps, Sampurna, what do you suggest? Or should I allow people to ask me questions as we go along? I have no problems either way.
So we can do it at the end. So if you have a question in your mind, feel free to put it in the Q&A box and keep a track of it. If you have similar questions, then upvote the question that you want to be answered, and we will take it at the end of the session for sure.
Okay, thank you then. So let me just share the PPT. Yeah. Okay, so I've called it Walking the Tightrope, Navigating Gender Issues at the Workplace. And the reason I call it, you know, Walking the Tightrope is because for women, it's a really, you know, kind of difficult balance that they have to maintain in order to be successful and in order to kind of avoid getting stereotyped or slotted into little, you know, some kind of a sort of picture of someone as someone who's a woman rather than a professional. So, you know, sometimes the gender aspect becomes more sort of highlighted as compared to your own qualifications or your competence or your abilities. And I think that women have to really navigate their roles a little more carefully as compared to men, because there are a lot of gender stereotypes, both in society and in the workplace, which tend to play out in interesting ways at the workplace, especially. Okay, so let me start off by sharing some good news. You know, if you look at the recent years, Globally, this has been a better time because there has been an incremental increase in the percentage of women in senior management. In fact, in 2019, for the first time, it increased to, or it grew to 29%, which is, I think, the highest that we have ever seen. And so that was something that, a lot of people said we need to celebrate. And in 2020, this percentage has stabilized, it's remained the same. And also, if you look at, global mid-market companies, around 87% of them have had at least one woman in a senior management role in 2020. So these are some of the kind of positive improvements that we see in terms of increased, gender diversity in the C-suite in companies across the world. However, we can't celebrate so quickly because there's still a long way to go. There is a slippery slope that we have to still climb. And if you look at some of the findings, there's a McKinsey report from 2021. There's this Catalyst study in 2020, which has talked about something called the broken rung. So what is the broken rung? That right at entry levels into their first managerial positions, women are falling behind early in their careers. So for every 100 men who get promoted, there are about 86 women who get promoted. So, while they both join the organization around the same time, as you're going up the ladder, women are facing what they call the broken rung. That it's a little more difficult for women to get that first promotion, right in the beginning of their careers. In India, we have found that the leaky pipeline exists even between junior to mid-level management. So, I don't have the latest data. I was trying to look for it. But in 2016, 48% of women dropped out between junior to mid-levels. So even though organizations were trying to bring in more women, women may have got recruited into organizations, but they didn't stay as they went up the ladder, and we have to think about why. Also, unfortunately, India has the third lowest global representation of women managers, ahead only of South Korea and Japan. And this is a 2020 report. We have only 2% of CEOs in India as part of the 2020 report. So that's not a very good figure for us. And India ranked 108th out of 149 countries in the gender gap index, which means at the same level, the salaries of men are around 19% higher than that of women. So there is a gender gap in terms of salary at same levels of in an occupation. So these are not very encouraging kinds of data. And I guess the first thing that we need to look at is why. Why is this happening? What are the factors that are preventing women from, moving up the ladder, or from not having the same kind of career outcomes that men may be having? So if we look at the kinds of barriers, I'm going to kind of divide them into two types of barriers. One is what I call structural barriers, what are the systemic barriers that we face or we see in organizations. And the other are what I've referred to as attitudinal barriers, all right? So the first thing that you see is that because there are more men than women in organizations, and because there are significantly more men at higher levels in organizations than women, you find that there is a differential access to opportunity, information, support, and power for both men and women. Why? You have these in-groups, you have these, buddies, interactions that men may have with other men. And very often women feel isolated or excluded from these old boy networks, or from the various kinds of interactions that men may have, both socially as well as within the organization. So men tend to have many more opportunities to access information, to get support, and to be able to get people to influence the system on their behalf. So in fact, if you look at, say, data on mentoring, there has been a lot of work on trying to, sort of use mentoring as an opportunity to help women to develop better networks in organizations. However, interestingly, it was found that these mentoring programs were not working. And when the research tried to kind of probe deeper into it, they found that, first of all, women had mentors who were less powerful as compared to their male colleagues. And male colleagues had mentors who were also willing to sponsor them for, say, a prized training program or for a role, or were able to use their networks to get them access and visibility in a larger set of situations as compared to women. So even if you look at a mentoring program for both men and women, you would see that there would be some kind of differences that would appear in terms of the opportunities that women got. And therefore, women find it much more difficult to navigate their careers because they do not have the access to these resources. The other thing that is happening is that, as you move up the ladder in an organization, you're expected to take on more responsibilities. And in India, as in the US, you have something that we refer to as a culture of hours. What does that mean? It means that people are expected to stay late at work. And one of the ways in which your commitment to the workplace is, being judged is by how long you spend in the workplace. And as you move up the ladder, it is expected that you will take more responsibility and show greater commitment to the workplace. So that is one kind of issue that women face because, this eats into their time at home, and they may have other roles or demands that, they have to fulfill. And along with that, if you look at the current scenario, with all the technological advances, I would say that for both men and women, there has been a blurring of boundaries of work and home. And it has created a kind of culture of constant accessibility. You're supposed to be available 24/7. And I'm sure that, I don't know whether you as students had to deal with this. Did you have classes at timings which maybe you did not earlier? But you'll find that for a lot of people at work, they were expected to be available at all kinds of hours, even though they were working from home. And therefore, it was kind of becoming more difficult to manage, the work hours versus the family time and the demands of the family. So this is another kind of issue that creates pressures for women. Women are, also, you're young, but, as you go up the ladder in an organization, women are also disadvantaged by the convergence of their biological and professional clocks. So, whether to have a child, when to have a child, one of the interesting issues that women face, by the way, is that whenever a woman has a child, she loses almost 1 or 2 years of seniority. So we call it the motherhood penalty, that women tend to lose out whenever they have children because they have to take leave, and that affects their commitment, and that affects their promotions and their, the kind of perceptions of people about them and their commitment to the workplace. So all of this also creates issues. And interestingly, there's been a lot of research in the US. They have these interesting time data series, where they, basically it's a set of data that they collect where they ask men and women to note down maybe across, say, 3 days or 4 days in a week, what they've been doing from morning to evening. So they get them to write their diaries. And research has indicated that women spend twice as much time on childcare and housework as compared to men. Now that's in the US. And I'm sure that if we did studies like that in India, we'd probably find that, women are putting in much, much more. So you're finding that it almost seems like women are doing two jobs, at the same time in that 24 hours as compared to men. If you add to the other kinds of structural barriers that people face in organizations, you find that most organizations have inadequate workplace policies. So whether it is in terms of access to leave, for example, if men do not get a paternity leave, then naturally the stereotype of women having to take care of the child becomes reinforced. So it is not just men who are not able to spend more time with their kids, but it's also women who are not able to have the support of their spouses in, taking care of the child. So you can see that it becomes a kind of a, reinforcing factor for the stereotypes. I don't know how many organizations try to help in terms of childcare or creches or ways in which families can manage, childcare. Interestingly, again, flexible arrangements, before the COVID struck, a lot of companies said that, you can't have people working from home. It disrupts things. But look at how seamlessly organizations moved into work from home, right? And today you can't say that flexible arrangements don't work because they have worked. However, organizations still have that mindset that if you come to the workplace, you are more committed. And, one of my PhD students at IIM Calcutta had done her thesis on diversity and policies, gender-friendly policies in organizations. And interestingly, we found that companies which had gender-friendly policies had fewer women at the top. And when we tried to interview these women to find out what was happening, to interview people, we found that if women accessed these women-friendly policies, they were seen as being less committed, or they were seen as prioritizing family over the organization. And that affected perceptions about them. So you can see that culture in most organizations still values very male stereotypical norms, such as, being assertive and tough and decisive. So you'll find that there has been a lot of research which shows that women have different leadership styles as compared to men. They have different communication styles as compared to men. They have different negotiation styles as compared to men. But unfortunately, the accepted norms for leadership styles or for communication or for negotiation tend to be the kind of male-dominated styles. Now, what does this do? There is a lot of workload that women have to deal with, and this often pushes highly qualified women off the leadership track. So they tend to avoid getting into the leadership track because they have too much on their plate. And that is one of the reasons why you have fewer women as you go up the ladder, because it becomes more and more difficult for them to balance or to walk that tightrope. The excessive workloads also leave very little time for them for networking and the mentoring opportunities. So very often women do not want to, use the weekend for going and meeting colleagues or, going in for a networking event or something like that, because they feel that, okay, I have to get my other things done. And therefore you find that they are not really able to invest in their own professional development the way that men are able to. In the old days, when you had this really very stereotyped picture of man breadwinner and woman homemaker, organizations had a good time, because when you bought one, which was the man, you got one free, which was the woman, because the woman took care of everything else, and the man could devote all his attention and time to the organization. But now, as you have both women and men coming into the workplace, who takes care of the family? That becomes the issue. So both young men today as well as women are facing this pressure of having to balance work and life, because you don't have somebody to take care of everything seamlessly behind you. Hopefully, young men are taking on more responsibilities. And therefore, in fact, I remember a study that we had done, in which we found that a lot of young men, even single men, were finding it difficult to manage, say, elderly parents or sickness in the family, because there was nobody else to take care of that, and they had to balance between work and some of these demands at home. Now let's look at what are these structural or attitudinal barriers. Okay, let me tell you that there is a traditional difference or a stereotype of men being aggressive, competitive, self-reliant, risk-taking, and women being nurturant, supportive, sensitive, emotional, communicative. But let me tell you, first of all, that these are not some innate behaviors. These are learned. We are socialized into roles. And as society becomes more, if you understand what I mean when I say androgynous, which is more, equal, hopefully some of these traditional stereotypes are breaking. All right. So, unfortunately, however, in organizations, there is an expectation about women. And this is how it plays out. So the tightrope that I was talking about is really about this women being caught in a double bind. What is a double bind? It's a kind of a situation where you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Whatever you do, it's a bad option for you. So one of the things that you find is that if women compete like men, they're considered unfeminine and not likable. And if they emphasize family, they're considered uncommitted. So, they are constantly dealing with this dilemma between competence versus likability. Should I try to fit in, or should I show my competence and capabilities? And agency versus communion. Should I, take charge? Should I show my independence versus trying to carry everyone along or be nice to everyone and, belong to the group? And along with this double bind, women often face two kinds of prejudices, one of two kinds of prejudices from men. One is what we call benevolent sexism, which is where men tend to be very kind and patronizing and nice and protective of women who are feminine and likable. So they say, no, you don't do it, very chivalrous, very nice. But then that doesn't help the woman, because she may be liked, but then she's not seen as someone who has leadership skills. Or they have to face hostile sexism because they are trying to, they are seen as aggressive, or they are seen as non-feminine, and they are seen as being kind of not really behaving like women should. And therefore, there is a lot of hostility, and, there are a lot of kind of aggressive comments about their behavior. So I think that one of the issues is that, unfortunately, women buy into these stereotypes. Not all women, but many women buy into these stereotypes. And they start thinking that, I should fit in, or I want to be liked, or there are feelings of guilt about, being assertive or taking charge. There are a lot of very interesting studies, which have shown that women have a fear of success. So, they don't want to be seen as successful because then that reduces their likability. And they try to downplay their careers sometimes in order to do this. Now, as the other issue that women face is that as women rise in the hierarchy, they are fewer in number. And because they are scarce, they are very visible. So, a lot of women directors and, senior people in senior positions, in leadership positions, have told me that, when you enter the room, everyone stares at you because you're the only woman in a room of men, all men. And therefore, you are subject to greater scrutiny, you are more visible, and it makes you more self-conscious. Because, whatever you say is being noticed, whatever you do is being watched. And it's almost like living in a glass house or a glass room, because you're constantly trying to navigate your, the impression that you are creating because everybody is scrutinizing you. Whereas if a man walks in and takes up a role as a director, he perhaps can ease himself in much more easily because there are many other women. Another issue that women sometimes face, and this is something that I see even in MBA institutes, is this issue of tokenism. That often people see women who are successful as the token woman to showcase or to show that our organization is very progressive, or our institute is progressive, we are taking in more women. And unfortunately, women also buy into this picture of tokenism, and they think that they are there because of being the token representative of their group, and therefore they perhaps start feeling a little less confident. Maybe there is an imposter syndrome working there. Do I deserve to be here? So these are some of the issues that women are confronted with. So I'll just quickly go through some of the consequences, and then I'll just move on to the some of the ways in which we can deal with this. So, unfortunately, because women have to deal with pressures by both the organizational and societal demands, they have to make difficult choices. And they usually do this by either selecting less demanding roles or taking a break to balance work and home. And this often reinforces the stereotype in the organization that women are less committed and therefore less worthy of opportunities for mentoring, training, and challenging assignments. I just want to kind of, I'm not going to go through everything that's in this slide, but I'm going to just raise this issue of today, gender bias is a little more invisible. So it's actually more difficult to track. Today you will not be hear people very openly being biased against women because we've all learned to be a little more woke or nuanced or whatever it is. But the kind of things that you see is that the bias comes out in terms of investments in career development. So you'll see that it is the men who get the more challenging assignments, or all things being equal, the man who will get a more prestigious training opportunity. So they are able to upskill themselves much faster and much better as compared to women. And women also get promotions which are kind of lateral movements rather than promotions. Rather than moving upwards, you move sideways. And I also would like to add that often women don't negotiate. They're less likely to negotiate. There's this article which says nice girls don't ask. And in that they talk about how one of the reasons for the gender pay gap is that women don't ask for what they think that what they deserve. They don't try to, they accept what is given to them. And men are more likely to negotiate for a better deal, for a better pay, for a better salary. And there's a lot of research on this. So I would say that because of this, because women don't ask, they don't get. And that is something that women need to think about. And again, let me also add that, post COVID-19, there has been a lot of interesting work on looking at how women bosses versus men bosses have fared. And it has been found that employees who had women bosses were much more engaged and satisfied as compared to men bosses, because women have emerged as very strong, inclusive leaders during the COVID situation. They have taken more work, they have supported their teams, they have promoted employee well-being, they have shown greater empathy, and therefore they have really shown the leadership styles that were needed in this tremendous time of stress and uncertainty. However, this critical work is still unrecognized and unrewarded by organizations which take a very traditional approach to, you know, uh, looking at promotions or looking at leadership. And therefore, you find that research has also shown that women have faced greater exhaustion, burnout, and there is also a greater, attrition rate among women at the workplace, or downshifting, taking on less demanding roles by women. Okay, so now let's come to the last part of the discussion, which is really around the issue of how do you navigate some of these gender barriers. I think the first step that I would really focus on is to know who you are. I think it's important for us to identify our own styles, to understand where they work and where they don't, and to manage some of our anxieties or our styles in order to have better outcomes at the workplace. So, for example, there's a lot of work around the fact that women tend to be more demanding of themselves. They tend to be more other-oriented than self-oriented. Women tend to do too much. They take on too much because they can't say no. So I think that if we are self-aware and we are aware of some of these aspects, and we are able to regulate ourselves, which is manage and control some of these impulses within ourselves, to learn to say no, to learn to be a little more assertive, I think it helps us as we navigate relationships and work in the workplace. I think it's also important for us to, if we are, thinking of having a good career, to take charge of our careers and build our credibility. So if you build your credibility by putting in hard work, by showing your skills and competence, you are kind of building a reputation for yourself, which will help you when you have to face maybe some demands from home, because you've proven yourself, you've proved your capabilities. It's also important for women to look for strong mentors and sponsors. I think, again, you have to learn to identify priorities in your life and to think about what are the possibilities and how can I navigate those possibilities. I think women don't ask in organizations. Often, if you have been a good employee, you can ask and you may get. And I have numerous examples of that. In fact, interestingly, research on negotiation shows that 70% of the time when you ask, you get what you want. But you have to ask it well. So you have to learn the art of persuasion. So I think that if we are able to be clear about who we are, if we are able to manage our own, areas of improvement, so to speak, and we are able to kind of understand that we need to develop new styles to negotiate with the organization, and to also understand how far or how much we want to do, I think we can be effective as, much as, say, a man. Now, I want to add something for people who are men in this audience. I have found that very often in India, there are men who also lack assertiveness, and they also get taken for granted. They also find it difficult to say no. And therefore, they also face some of these issues that I have been talking about. That they get taken for granted, they get dumped with all the work, they may not be good at impression management, and it affects their outcomes. So I would say that, you know, I think it's very important to understand and to manage your boundaries and to find a balance between being nice and being assertive, being nicely assertive, perhaps. Okay, I'm going to stop here for now because I think let's take questions. I think that's more interesting for me.
Hi, ma'am. Thank you so much for that lovely.
I just disclose this. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, let me stop.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Just a moment. I will. Yeah. Okay, so we do have some questions on the dashboard, and we will begin with the first question that we received today, which is from Sneh Ankit. He asks, as a manager, if you try to understand difficulties of your female subordinate and assign tasks in order to support her to manage her work and life balance, then sometimes you're seen as somewhat favoring her as opposed to the rest, and that can create a friction within the team. So what is the best case scenario for managing a diverse team? And I think by diverse, he means with enough, representation of men and women.
Yeah. So, I would say that, as a manager, you should support anyone who has issues. In today's world, I would say that today, wherever I go, whenever we talk about leadership, we are talking about authentic leadership, about inclusive leadership, about leaders showing empathy. And I think that, both men and women in the last 2 years have had to deal with a lot of issues at the workplace, at the home, and also at the workplace in terms of uncertainty, in terms of job loss, in terms of, grief and loss in the family. So I think that, we need to have a more empathetic approach to anyone who has life issues. But we need to ensure that we also get them to work. So, it's a kind of a fine balance between getting people to do their work and also, so giving them some flexibility, but also ensuring that their, KRAs or whatever are met. Because, ultimately you have to meet your KRAs as well. And if you're willing to do that for anyone, then I don't think it kind of affects just women. And if you help the man, hopefully you're also helping the woman.
Yeah.
So that is my take on it. Having said that, I would say that organizations need to create policies which are kind of family friendly, regardless of men and women. So I think in today's world, organizations are looking at what are the practices that we need to kind of do away with.
Yeah.
And what are the ways in which we can support employees to be fully engaged while they are at work. And not to equate a number of hours spent at work with commitment.
Thank you, ma'am. That was, I'm sure Sneh would have benefited from that, and so did everyone else. Millie has a question which a lot of others have also upvoted, and they want to hear your thoughts on this. So Millie asks, what is the solution of all these barriers? So we spoke about attitudinal barriers, organizational barriers, and such. What are the solutions to kind of overcome some of these barriers as an individual or as an organization? What can be done to improve the system at the workplace? And could you sort of discuss some points that are adaptable?
So I think I did talk a little bit about individual, strategies that we can take. I think, I personally feel that, we need to be aware of our styles and not to succumb to things unconsciously. So if I know that I like being liked, I need to control my need to be liked.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
it's, I think somewhere you have to understand that you cannot be liked by the whole world, right? It's a very difficult life goal to be liked by everybody in the world. So you have to think of what is it that I should focus on. So, when you are clear about some of these things, it helps you to navigate and manage some of those decisions at the workplace. So do you succumb to stereotypes? Do you fight every fight, or do you choose your battles in the workplace? I would say choose a few. Don't get into a, men against women kind of a stance. It doesn't help. It doesn't help you at all. So I would say that, you should know where you should put your foot down and where you don't need to put your foot down. So you're not here to kind of transform every male that you come across. But you're here to ensure that you can get your work done and you get your respect and you get things moving. So I think, you have to keep the bigger picture also in mind. When it comes to organizational strategies, the reason I didn't put them down was because I thought I was talking to young students. And I thought that you may not be be interested in looking at what organizations could do. But there are many things that organizations can do. I think organizations need to work. I'll give you an example of a company. So a company, in a company, it's a company which has got the best, it's got the best award for, being an employee friendly company in, I think, yeah. So this was actually in the US, but it's actually a company which has also got the best employer award in India as well. So what they did was they were trying to understand that they were trying to promote women. So, like what Sneh had pointed out, they were trying to encourage women to go for prestigious training programs and to, get them to get into, important client meetings and, so giving them more visibility and all that. And they found women were not really looking very happy and they were not agreeing to go. They were not really interested in volunteering for these kinds of assignments. So they didn't sort of say that, oh, women, they lack ambition or something like that. They actually went to the women and asked them why. And a lot of the women said something very simple. They said, all your training or all your, these out of town events start on a Monday morning. So we have to travel on a Sunday. And for us, Saturday and Sunday is sacrosanct because that's the time we get all our work done at home, cooking for the week, laundry, getting the children prepared, getting everything done. So, it's the time where we are able to come up to speed as far as the family is concerned. And if I travel on a Sunday, it's very tough. Many of them also had support, and that support was not available on a Sunday, perhaps, because, they had also taken off. So what they did was they did just something very simple. They said for every training from our institute, from our organization, we will start on a Monday afternoon. People will not travel on Sundays, men or women. Everybody will travel on Monday morning to go to wherever they have to go for the training or for the assignment or whatever. Suddenly they found many more women taking up these assignments. They also found that men were also happy with this change. And this is what I think we are talking about today. That we don't look at it as a woman problem or a man problem. It is an employee problem. And how do we facilitate, this whole work-life issue for both men and women? Because when you have dual income families or when you have both men and women coming to the workplace, you will have these issues. It's not the old, zamana or the generation anymore. So I would say that that's one way. Of course, flexible work, trying to look for, more nuanced role models as far as leadership is concerned. There are many ways in which you can do it. I think you're muted.
Yes. Thank you so much, ma'am. Gauravi is asking, in addition to the compulsory women directors on the board of directors of company in India, is the addition of the compulsory, women directors, is it really helping the case for more women to be in senior management role, or is it just a tokenism, a tokenist gesture that has just been done to kind of please the audiences.
So let me say one thing, that research has shown that whenever you have women in the top management or on the board, the organization has better corporate governance records. So there is a case for having women in senior positions or even on the board. And I think that one of the reasons why, it was decided, there was a committee, I remember which one it was, it could have been the Kumaramangalam Birla committee, which said that, we will have one woman director on each board, at least one woman director. I think it helps, but I do agree that it could lead to tokenism depending on how that woman is selected and how that woman sees her role and how she performs. If she feels that, I'm here as a kind of token woman and, people are suffering my presence just because I'm a woman, then, it's no use. But if the woman is a person who is a credible and very competent and qualified person, and, you benefit and, she gets respect and she wields respect and she herself is self-confident and assertive, definitely I would say it could help. Right.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is from Deepika. She says that early in career, a nice or a polite no is also sometimes considered to be non-proactive and not willing to take that extra mile to learn something new. How do you suggest is the best way to deal with a situation like that?
Yeah. So one of the things I always say is that when you join a new organization, build your credibility. Show that you're eager to learn. Don't keep complaining. Take initiative. Accept assignments. Try and develop a good learning mindset. If you show that you are a learner, you are willing to do things, but as you do things, you should also at some point start thinking about what is it that I should be doing and what is it that I should not be doing. And so I would say that establish your credibility, show that you are hardworking, and then as you grow in the role, as you grow as an employee, think about what are the things that I should be saying no to, and to try and develop a good rationale for why you are saying no. So say that, yes, I think so, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. And this is for both men and women. I think in India, we find that we think that we should say yes to everything. The problem is you're just delaying the no, because you may not be able to do a lot of things. Yeah. And it starts affecting your credibility. So yeah. If we are able to manage our boundaries politely but firmly, I think other people start accepting them as well.
There's an interesting question from Bernish. He asks, what is your take on feminism among men? How to not seem like a benevolent sexist while being a feminist? And this is kind of to your point when you were saying that, people are woke now. So you don't see the sexism as blatant as we saw it earlier. So what's your take on that, ma'am?
Yeah. So I think it's important for you to think about, when you say that you are a feminist, do you see women as equal or someone who you have to be extra nice to? I think I would hate to be patronized. I think it's important to understand that women may not want you to, say, fight their battles for them or something like that. Unless, so please wait to be asked before you make those assumptions, right? So yes, I think be positive, be accepting, and listen and be respectful of your colleagues. I think that's what I would say.
Ma'am, we have about a minute to go, but we still have quite a few questions. Would you mind staying on for another 10 minutes? And
not at all. Let me
thank you so much. Okay, so we will try and take the questions that have been upvoted. So Kriti asks, despite higher expertise and qualifications, women tend to take up less demanding roles due to family or societal pressures, or their own conditioning. And they are repeatedly reminded that despite their career, at the end of the day, they need to prioritize their personal family life. So how are women supposed to sort of overcome this conditioning as a whole and learn to put their ambitions first if that is what they want to?
So my sense is, I don't want to kind of start a revolution here, but all I will say is anything that is learned can be unlearned. Okay. And I think that if you want something strongly enough, if you believe that you will be happier as a person by having a career or being, doing your work, I think you have to take some kind of a stance or take some kind of a decision and, sort of showcase your priorities. I think I know that for me, I mean, not working was not an option. I mean, I would have probably, died or killed somebody if I didn't, So I think you should know yourself. And if you, so I don't want to be a kind of a, telling others what to do person. I mean, it's up to you. It's your life. If you think that family is the most important thing, then it is. But I'm one of those people who believes that you can have everything. It's about planning and managing.
Yeah.
So, you can have children and you can have a successful career. It's how you manage it. I always tell I used to tell my students that don't start a new job and a new relationship or a marriage at the same time, or don't have a child and a new job at the same time, because each of them will have demands of you. So it's also about planning. It's also about how do you kind of plan your life and your career. And you can do it.
And ma'am, it's lovely that you brought the self into it, because Pratik's question is to that, where he says that, how did you manage both your professional and personal life, and what kind of hurdles did you face, if any?
A very strong sense of identity, who I am and where my identity comes from, right? So I was very clear about what I wanted to, and therefore it was easy for me to negotiate with my husband as well. I mean, I told him that there are these things which are non-negotiable. And of course, I chose well. So that is also there. But the other thing is that even at the workplace, when I joined IIM Calcutta, I was the second woman who joined there. And, it was a very kind of male-dominated place. And initially, I was facing a lot of these stereotypes, of, oh, we are having an international conference, so, you are going to be in charge of the cultural program. I said, hello. I said, I'm going to chair a session. I'm not into all this cultural program. You get somebody else to do the cultural program. Or I remember JRD Tata is coming, so, you can give him the bouquet. I said, why? So then they would say, no, you're the youngest. I said, no, I'm not the youngest. This colleague is the youngest, some male colleague. So he gave the bouquet. Now, I did fight some of these battles, and I guess I was known as a bit of an upstart. But I think it didn't matter, because I think if you can prove that you are a competent person, you're good at your role as a teacher, as a researcher, as an academic administrator, you will get the respect by and by. Meanwhile, don't worry.
And it's lovely that how, some of your anecdotes kind of overlap into the questions that we have. So Mehak asks, she actually is working in a team with all men, and she sometimes finds it difficult to mingle with them at times, and even share her thoughts out loud, and she states that she feels a very strong sense of exclusion at the workplace. So how does she, she asks, how does she deal with this situation?
I think, one of the things that I found when I joined IIM Calcutta, long years ago, was that men also feel uncomfortable around women and they don't know how to behave with, so who's going to blink first? I decided I would blink first. I said, it's okay. You have to go out and talk to people. And you'll always find some people who are a little more comfortable and they will start the conversation. And, we talk about these, smoking groups or these drinking groups. And I didn't drink or smoke. But then you can also have coffee with people, right? So you have to find your way, or you have to, be at least show that you are comfortable with them so that they start feeling comfortable. I think, we have to assume that the other person is also not hostile towards you, but is probably as awkward or whatever. And that, we have to sort of try and find some kind of a common ground. And you will find that ultimately we are all humans under the skin. So, even if you're a man or a woman, you will find areas of, of interaction. Do it slowly, but I think take initiative, go and talk to them. And then they'll start realizing that the more you communicate, the less people stereotype you. The more you talk to people, the less people will think, oh, she's a snob, or oh, she's not one of us, or whatever.
Yeah. So the next question is from Aditya. He says, would not viewing everything from an androgynous lens in a fast-paced, profit and growth-oriented world lead to more inflexible policies for both men and women in the long run, given that men and women have different leadership styles that work better in different settings? Okay, this has a lot of contingencies, but do you want me to read it out to you again?
Yeah.
Would not viewing everything from an androgynous lens in a fast-paced, profit and growth-oriented world lead to more inflexible policies for both men and women in the long run, given that men and women have different styles of leadership and which tend to work better in the context that they operate in?
So let me first say that there is no one best leadership style. Let's just get it out there. All right. There's no one best leadership style.
Also, there is no woman leadership style and man leadership style.
No, there isn't. There's some research which says that women tend to prefer a more inclusive leadership style, whereas men tend to be more comfortable in an authoritarian or authority or a demanding kind of style. But having said that, if people are androgynous, I would say they would be more flexible. They'd be able to move either way, both men and women. No? They would be able to take different approaches in different contexts. So definitely leadership style is driven by context and not by the fast-paced, profit-oriented, whatever you said. Because I think that today we are dealing with a very uncertain world, VUCA. And we are looking at whatever we call the triple bottom line, so to speak. So, when we talk about profit orientation, we should also talk about sustainability, because otherwise we'll all be dead and gone, right? So, I think we can't take a very kind of a tunnel kind of way of looking at the world. I think, when you are more androgynous, you're kind of flexible and adaptive. And today we are talking about adaptive leadership, we are talking about flexibility, we're talking about agility. And how can you be agile if you are stuck to a stereotype one way or the other? I mean, I haven't got what you're saying actually. So I don't think androgynous leads to a rigid style.
Ananya has the next question. She asks, despite proving their ability, a lot of times at the higher management levels, the board tends to assume and reiterate that women are more emotional and give an excuse of some biological context pertaining to the woman. She says that she's faced it in leadership roles at the undergrad level. She and she has read articles on it, that it's a thing that women face. So she asks, what's your opinion about this and how do we kind of navigate this?
Okay, so one of the issues that we talk about when we talk about emotional intelligence is the ability to use our emotions appropriately in a situation. Are you talking about, periods and, how women tend to be more emotional during their periods? Are you saying something around
I
that as
think,
well?
yeah, she's talking about emotional in terms of,
So women tend to, because of hormonal, changes in their body, women tend to be more emotional when they are having their, that time of the month or whatever that people like to call it, when you're having your periods. Now, what I would say is that this is where self-awareness helps, right? If I know that I am having my periods and I know I'm going to be getting into an emotional state, I avoid getting into certain kinds of uh, issues or interactions, or I try to be a little more careful. So emotional intelligence is about self-regulation. How do I regulate my emotions? And I think that one of the things that we need to do is to supplement, so there are certain situations where emotional appeal or emotions are useful in convincing others. Please join the Indian army. It's going to be an emotional appeal to you. Do it for your nation, for your country. But there are certain kinds of decisions and organizations which have to be data-based.
yeah.
So I think we need to develop a more, flexible way of persuading or communicating with others. Huh? And we need to supplement our, styles with styles which could be a little more convincing in different scenarios. So if I give you some data, maybe you will be willing to listen to it more than if I say, please, do it for your whatever country.
Yeah.
So I think that it's something about managing ourselves. And this is what I was talking about when I talked about your identity, self-awareness, self-regulation. That your styles are not going to be useful in every situation for any of us. Something that is a strength becomes a weakness in another situation. But do I learn to navigate that? And do I manage myself?
So we still have quite a few questions, but we'll do one last and close the session. So this is from Apurva. She asks, has enforcing reservations or any legal requirement for women being employed or included in the board, or just the diversity quota, quote unquote, right? Has that worsened the situation by making the way one in which that one perceives that the professional as a woman who is there is due to a legal requirement and not due to a professional one?
So yeah, it's a very interesting question, because at one level, for a long time, I have fought for equality for women, and therefore I've never supported any reservations for women, because I think women are equal. They don't need anyone's push up, thank you. But having said that, there are, in a country like ours where I have seen, and I'm sad to say this, that, women are less privileged in terms of access to education, to resources. Sometimes you need to give them a leg up. Having said this, what I find is that ultimately it's not whether it's legal or whether it's professional or whatever, it's how you take it. How do you as a woman behave in that situation? If a woman goes into a situation and looks apologetic and says, I'm so sorry for being here, then, she's not going to get the kind of respect that she should. I think whatever reason, if you have been selected, if you are there, you are as much, an important part of that system as anybody else. And I have found that I'm on the board of a couple of organizations, and I have found that you can command respect and you can make your contribution and you can do what you want to do. So I think it's about you. I think if you are self-confident, if you can showcase your capabilities, people can't put you down forever. I don't think so.
Thank you so much. That's a very lovely note to kind of close the session, to say that, if you get an opportunity, then make the most of it. And, and once you're there, it's about getting the foot in the door. And once you have that one foot in, then walk right into that door and, make the make it the best for yourself. Thank you.
Make it the best for every other woman.
Everybody else, absolutely. That if you are competent and you can, build credibility, that means other women will get opportunities despite the quota. They'll just get, because they will acknowledge the fact that, there is space for women to come in and, work as equals at the workplace.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much to all of you for joining in on a weekday evening. We really, really appreciate it. This was a very, very engaging session. I have put down the contact details and some other details on the chat. You have a quick minute to kind of copy it. It's all on the website. Go to our website, bitsum.edu.in. You will find it's a very exhaustive and useful resource. One of you had asked a question on how do I learn the art of persuasion?
I was just going to say that.
Yes.
Did you learn it at the institute?
Yes. It's a whole course that is on offer at the Winning at the Workplace as a part of the Winning at the Workplace curriculum. It's a course that you learn at BitSum when you come here, so you learn it at BitSum. On that note, thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Have a very good night. All the very best.
All the best to all of you, and all the best in your life and careers.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.